Today is the day Donald Trump is inaugurated President of the United States for the second time. And as I'm sure everyone is aware by now, this has caused no end of contention and anger and frustration. It's ruined friendships and families, and the furry fandom has been no exception. In fact, it seems the furry fandom has been hit especially hard, and frequently seen in arguments are comparisons of Donald Trump and his supporters to the Nazis or Hitler. Is this extreme? I'm not so sure. Before you click away, hold on a minute, because what I want to do here is take an objective look at what all this really means for the furry fandom. Now let me preface this with a few things. I've held off making any commentary on this because I hate seeing all this misery and I don't really want to give it attention. But it's become pretty much unavoidable at this point, and a lot of things are intensifying. Actually, intensifying might not be the right word. A better word might be dangerous. Now, I want to get along with everyone in the fandom and see as much love and harmony as possible. This community has always held a very special place in my heart for personal reasons, and I hate to see the suffering that's going on in the arguments and the fighting. So the purpose here is not to target or single anyone out on either side or either opinion. It is just to share my observations here as objectively as possible. And I also can't get into everything because there is a lot in play here, so I'm going to be looking at some key examples. If you like these videos and want to support this channel, please go check out our store. Currently, there's an assortment of items with the Derpy Tales logo done by artist Demonic Furry. The goal is to add more custom art designs in the near future, so make sure you check back for that. But we've also partnered with local creators to put any of your uploaded designs on a t-shirt or hoodie. Contact us via the site if that's something you're interested in, and they will hand design and create your custom merchandise. Now back to the video, and as always, thanks for watching. Now to start off with, let's look at who Donald Trump associates with or inspires on the political front when it comes to furries. A lot of this began to intensify last year and is carried over full force into this year. Of course, we remember the E621 banning issues in North Carolina and the attempted banning in Arizona with a lot of MAGA Republican far-right individuals. And then, of course, there was the Floridian issues with Ron DeSantis that affected Megaplex and other furry activities there. Oklahoma became a specific battleground with Governor Kevin Stitt and a representative who was very outspoken by the name of Justin Humphrey. Here's a soundbite from him in his own words.
And then people are going to call me insane for running this bill. Hell, I'd say they're insane on that. I mean, that's insanity. And it's time that we stop the insanity. If you got an animal coming to school, how about we get them vaccinated? How about we get them neutered? And how about we send them to the pound? And that's what this bill is going to be about. Stop this ignorance and let's have school. And again, it is sad that this is going on, but it is a state problem. And I don't want to wait till it comes to our district. I want to address it while it's still in Oklahoma City and Tulsa area. And so those people up there have lost their mind, letting these people pretend to be animals in the classroom. If they're going to be animals, let's send them a pound. Let's send them home. We're not. How do you teach a cat math? I don't think if you can do that, wow, you're really talented. So again, I don't want to see some kid going to the bathroom in a in a litter box, in a kitty litter there in the classroom. The fact that you would do that shows that you're insane. And if we've got superintendents that allow that, and we've got teachers that are allowing that, then we need to load them up along with that kid and take them to the mental ward. And that's exactly, won't beat around the bush. It's insanity. We need to call it what it is. And I'm happy to run the bill and address it.
Representative Humphrey tried to walk this back when confronted and said that it was a joke, but it obviously isn't. He was dead serious, as are the rest of these individuals and those that they associate with. In Humphrey's case, this is particularly troubling because he's exhibiting fanaticism and he sees nothing wrong with abducting children from school and mutilating them and putting them in prison, basically, or an animal pound or a mental asylum, simply because they choose to derive enjoyment from something that doesn't make sense to him and seems to make him angry. So again, going back to the accusation of is this Nazi-esque? Well, yeah, it kind of is. It's certainly fanatical and extreme and authoritarian or fascist. These people are not bothering him. A lot of what he's describing is things that fact checks have confirmed never happened.
But I think now more people know what furries are, but it seems that this may have been blown out of proportion.
It's just making him disproportionately angry that other people are having fun, apparently, and wielding the power that he has as a legislator. He is trying to bring physical and emotional harm to these people and the staff members that are condoning it. That is extremely disproportionate, violent, and dangerous behavior. And he is an authority figure that wields a lot of power. Now, this time, the public was able to get him to back off. But again, looking at the overall framework here of support being drawn from an overall collective, how long before that is not enough and the next time something like this begins to take place? And to that point of a framework or a support system that is basically agreeing with this kind of attitude or belief,
that many furries are marginalized in some way. Many identify as LGBTQ. A sizable percentage of furries are also neurodivergent, and as a result, they tend to view the furry community as a safe haven. It has heavy sexual overtones. It has a heavy sexual bent in its history. And in 2011, a survey of furries found that a third said sex is actually an important part of their furry participation. I would submit for the record, E.J. Dixon doesn't know what the hell she's talking about.
What happens when regular citizens begin to act unilaterally inspired by this and go out and conduct violence against furries? Ironically, a key component of this becoming a reality is originating inside of the fandom itself. Slowly but surely make us sheep. Ask us to comply with small things at first, but then it will get bigger and eventually detrimental, but it will be too late. Just as a frog doesn't notice water slowly getting hotter and then dies of the heat, we are slowly having our rights taken away and being pushed more and more to conformity, like communism. That quote was not talking about persecution of furries, but it was actually talking about the far right. This is Whiplash. He is a self-identified Christian conservative furry that I ran across on X. He is very outspoken against LGBT, against pornography, masturbation, any kind of sex outside of marriage. Basically, he posts a lot of ultra-religious or ultra-conservative material on his page, like this fact sheet that speaks out against homosexuality, but when reading the community note, fact checks show that this is not at all accurate. There's exchanges like this one with a furry artist who says that if you draw animalistic genitalia on your furry original character, that's zoophilic, even if the character is anthropomorphic, to which he responds, how about no porn at all, whether it be zoological or not? And here we see that apparently he likes to go to furry conventions and hand out flyers speaking against LGBT behaviors, and also a post citing the recent ban on TikTok saying that porn should be banned instead. This is certainly an example of the shots coming from inside the house, and if you've watched some of my other videos on the subject of burned furs or anti-furs, you'll see how this cross connects. Now, in the case of Whiplash, I'm not seeing him engage in or advocate for any violent or destructive behavior, but keep in mind that one of the key points I'm making here is that one thing influences another. It's like a domino effect. Or put another way, a lot of us come to furry fandom in general, and we see that there's others like us that we can identify with. That fosters a sense of community. So in kind of a perverted way, when you have these other kind of scenarios setting up, it does the same thing. So now one person can go and feel inspired and go a step beyond in another direction. Now, of course, the argument there would be, for example, from Whiplash, perhaps, well, if somebody does something violent and they're inspired by something that I said, I didn't ask them to do that. They acted on their own. And while technically that's true, what we're looking at here is another example of a bias or unacceptance that is proliferating through the fandom at an alarming rate. I think two key differences that makes this more widespread and more dangerous than the earlier incarnations of burned furs is the fact that the fandom is now larger, which is kind of a double-edged sword, and B, politics has infiltrated deeper into the fandom, and battle lines have been drawn, making things become very adversarial. Elements on both sides become entrenched in their beliefs and refuse to listen, and that just makes things worse. In addition to this complete breakdown of communication and harmony in some segments of the fandom, we now have an acute awareness of the danger that it poses, with many furries on both sides of the political aisle wanting to purchase weapons for their own safety. And this is where you can observe another strange contradiction. In previous times, not so long ago, those who were liberal or left-leaning tended to be anti-gun, frequently being quoted as saying they saw no reason for anyone in this society to have firearms, they should all be banned. And those on the right or more conservative would counter with everyone needs access to self-defense and that they would want everyone to be able to be adequately armed. Then, of course, there was a marked increase in acts of violence against those who were vulnerable, members of LGBT or furry fandom, who also tend to be more liberal-leaning. So for a brief time, it kind of caused a meeting of the minds where these individuals figured maybe I should get a gun or some kind of weapon for self-defense so I can't be victimized. And members of the more conservative elements were all for that, until they weren't. Again, to use Whiplash for an example, here's a comment that he made basically saying that mentally ill people should not own guns in a conversation with another furry who is stating that all trans people are mentally unstable. So now we're starting to see another odd contradiction because you're for the Second Amendment and for everyone to be able to stand up against their attacker unless they're gay or trans or possibly even furry if they're somebody you don't agree with, even though you identify as a furry. And that is the perfect segue for us to move up another rung on the ladder to Diezel Raccoon. There was a gay comedian last summer that went viral for making the statement, gay people supporting Hamas was like chickens supporting KFC, and that's certainly a valid point. Diezel is like the conservative version of this. And now let me be clear before we delve into this chapter. This is not an attack on Diezel. I'm using him as an example. He's certainly not the only one. But I'm using him specifically as an example because I'm familiar with this. I've seen a lot of these posts. He's well known in the fandom, and it really makes me sad. Now, what you've been looking at here is a few examples taken from Diezel's Fur Affinity page of him at conventions or artwork he's commissioned, just living his life being happy as a furry. Now, unfortunately for Diezel, he's risen to infamy as one of these furs that's extremely outspoken and clashes over politics. And there's examples of this both on the left and the right, and it's always really sad to see, and it's not really good for the individual furry or for the fandom when this happens. Here, Diezel's talking about losing a friend over his political beliefs. This seems to happen to Diezel a lot. He is adamant, however, in his conservative beliefs and values in supporting Donald Trump. What's of note, though, is that Diezel is more so a regular furry, unlike Whiplash that we looked at a little bit earlier. Diezel is okay with pornographic or yiffy material. He seems like he was okay going to regular conventions and mingling. So for him, he's integrated these hardline conservative values into his life as a gay furry somehow. And here's the cruel irony, because despite all the hatred that Diezel has gotten over the years, being mocked, made fun of, losing friends, being banned off of Fur Affinity, none of this matters at all with the conservative people that he looks up to so highly. Keep in mind, the individuals we're looking at, like Representative Humphrey from earlier, would want to see people like this put in mental asylums or treated like animals and forced vaccinated or neutered. They don't care if you identify with their beliefs. You're still a freak. You're still a stupid, worthless queer or mental patient or whatever that they want to get rid of and put out of the way. So now individuals like Diezel are in a position where you're hated on both sides. This was a recent exchange that happened between Diezel and another furry. Things got so heated that at one point the other furry invited Diezel to come to Texas Furry Fiesta and get in a fight during the convention. This really hurt to read the first time this was brought to my attention. It still hurts to look at this because it's just really sad to think that things went to that level at a furry convention that's supposed to be the most happy place for furries to go, that we're seriously having this talk where they're going to get in a fight. Now, whether or not they got in a fight, I don't know, but this clearly already went way too far. When you see exchanges like this, both sides are exhibiting an extreme unwillingness to listen, completely unwavering in their beliefs. And while I certainly can concede that left-leaning furries also go too far with what they say and how they handle this sometimes, it doesn't make them wrong in what they're saying. I'm not advocating gatekeeping the fandom. I mean, for one thing, it's proven impossible to do so. But keep in mind, if you're going to put yourself out as ultra-conservative, that's really not something that's possible, because the way the current landscape has went, people who are ultra-conservative hate you. And no matter what you're telling yourself, the very fact that you're in this fandom, they're going to hate you. To them, you're one of us. You won't be spared. You won't be shown mercy. You're going to be killed or maimed or imprisoned or whatever else, just like the rest of us, if things continue in the trajectory that they're going. But even sadder than that, while that's happening, you'll be isolated without a sense of community because the community is being further fragmented by this. And this brings us another step forward to the effect that this has on severely mentally ill loners that are observing all of this. And here we break down into two categories. Those that still identify with the fandom on some level, but feel in some sense an outcast or disenfranchised from the community, and those who have no affinity to the fandom and are just carrying around pure rage and anger towards it. Now, in the first category, we have furries who have been shunned or reprimanded in some sense for engaging in unacceptable behavior. And in shunning them or trying to hold them accountable, it's had the effect of, instead of making them want to do better, it makes them want to do harm to the community at large. An infamous example of that from the not so distant past was Ryan Hill, who took responsibility for a chemical gas attack at Midwest Fur Fest, causing the hotel to evacuate. And he engaged and continues to engage in threatening behavior and stalking behavior towards members in the fandom, while maintaining that he is a furry himself. Now, a more recent example that was brought to my attention is that of Benicio Navarro, who apparently was a disgruntled furry that expressed intent in conducting a mass shooting and executing a bunch of furries at further confusion and committing arson on the building. Now, the San Jose Police Department apparently got involved and conducted some kind of check but did not arrest him and said that there were no weapons. But, I mean, that's really not something that's 100% safe to say, because you can easily get them and hide them anywhere. But it seems, at least for the time being, this was an idle threat, which is certainly a good thing. But two concerning takeaways are, one, what would cause a furry to become so angry at their own community that they want to indiscriminately slaughter a whole bunch of furries at a happy convention that's supposed to be a happy, magical place? And two, how many others are harboring these feelings or plots, whether inside or outside of the community? It has long been known that recruiting those who see themselves as outcasts can be very useful in formulating patsies. The KGB recruited Kim Philby because he was gay and closeted in England in a time when that was not at all acceptable. And so the KGB was able to effectively turn him against MI6, causing one of the largest breaches in their history. In more recent times, ISIS or Daesh has been known to recruit prisoners that they've released who are angry at their country, or others who see themselves as outcasts or minorities, trying to promise them a better life and mask their true intention, basically using these people. Of course, there's always sickos who are more than willing to act out violently against strangers because it makes them feel good, but a lot of them got on their path by being groomed in a certain sense. This is something that we're seeing a lot of with the current incarnation of antifurries. Many of them are admittedly under 18, and a decent amount of them are also grown adults. There is a lot of grooming, not in a sexual sense, but in a sense to cultivate violence or instill these attitudes and beliefs. This is a video that was posted to an anti-furry YouTube page. It takes place somewhere in Russia, and it's a couple of anti-furs that go up to a couple of furries and apparently douse one of the furries with what looks like ginger ale. Now, in this case, that's certainly disrespectful and humiliating, and the fursuit's going to need to be cleaned, but it's not necessarily violent or hazardous to the wearer's health. But what if it was battery acid or gasoline and the person was set on fire? Sounds extreme? not as unlikely as you'd think. Keep in mind, this is Russia, and Russia has seen a lot of hatred towards furries and therians because President Putin and members of the Duma, the Russian lawmaking body, see them as an actual threat to the government in some weird sense. Obviously, members of the general public take a cue from this, and it basically gives them the green light to persecute these people. Sound familiar? Thinking back to what we talked about at the beginning of this video with lawmakers and President Trump and that whole camp, it's kind of a different, more aggressive variation of the same thing. The only reason it's more overt is because Russia is further down the authoritarian slope than we are, but that doesn't mean we can't catch up if we don't take caution. Now keep the idea of slippery slope in mind as we review this document. This was posted on that same channel that shared the Russian video we were just looking at. It's titled Advisory Document. And as far as I can tell, it was prepared by a child for children because there's a lot of references to being under 18 and what you can and can't do. There's also a lot of references to weapons and violence. Although the document starts off in the beginning saying that you should not use physical violence against furries, but it is effective to bully them, by section 3 we're talking about accumulating armor and weapons for combat. And although the document says that it doesn't encourage anyone to engage in actual violence, it walks the reader through accumulating body armor, weapons, and incendiary devices. It talks about shooting people with airsoft guns if you don't have a way to get an actual firearm, and it also talks about setting furries on fire, saying specifically, quote, melee weapons such as a bat or a knife are great for close combat. However, the most theoretically effective illegal method is fire. This method uses car fuel and fire to effectively burn the fursuit, which is often flammable. Grenades are also mentioned as being useful when open combat begins. So this is things that really don't need to be mentioned if you're trying to compile a document just talking about kind of bullying or harassing furries, which in and of itself is a really rotten thing to do, and what's wrong with you that you would want to go out of your way to do this, but including things about setting people on fire, blowing them up, wearing body armor while carrying assault weapons and shooting them, despite you putting the header, I'm not advocating violence, you're advocating violence. Now, if the intent is to hope somebody takes action on this and is radicalized by reading this, that's a very distinct possibility. Another thing that's noteworthy is that they lump in being LGBT, being into any kind of fetish, or being woke, or being a furry in general, is the same as being a pedophile, sexually abusing corpses or animals. So again, this is very extreme thinking, and whether this document was compiled by children or adults, they have serious mental health issues, and the intent is obviously to promote violent, extreme behavior. So how dangerous is all this really? I mean, after all I've really shown has been words. Well, words can become extremely dangerous when they influence attitudes and beliefs. Nicholas Cruz made headlines for killing a lot of people at his former school in Parkland, Florida. Todd McGee, a certified active shooter, anti-terrorism, police and security trainer and analyst, posted this analysis called Missed Signs on LinkedIn. He makes the case that catalysts and ideology converged to make Nicholas Cruz find it mentally acceptable to go kill these people. I think that is a very succinct and effective way of putting it, and I think it's something that we're seeing a lot of when it comes to this whole Trump effect as it applies to furry fandom. Certainly, people don't need an excuse to do terrible things to each other, but psychologically speaking, they tend to want it to be condoned in some sense, to have a rationale to feel like this behavior is greenlit by somebody. Sometimes that justification can come in the form of another monster. Elliot Rodger had justified in his mind that it was okay to kill a bunch of people because of his concepts on himself and his virginity and his lack of a sexual life. But this in turn caused Alex Minison to run a bunch of people over with a van because he saw the, at the time, deceased Rodgers as some kind of a leader, and he was in some kind of a war. Were these people mentally ill to begin with? Certainly. To reference back to the points raised by Mr. McGee, that would be your catalyst. But ideology played an active role in tipping them over the edge. They needed to have a green light to engage in this behavior. Now, certainly copycatting another attacker that shares ideology that you identify with would be more than sufficient for most to justify conducting these acts of violence. But what about when your ideology is in alignment with some of the most powerful members of the United States government, right up to the office of the president? So, taking all this into account and trying to draw an objective conclusion, is Donald Trump dangerous to furry fandom? Yes, he most certainly is. Because in order to be dangerous, you don't have to actually do anything yourself. You can influence or induce others to do it. Donald Trump has proven to be somebody who likes a lot of attention, he has a large ego, and he draws people to himself that will give him that attention and stroke his ego. But the weird result is that in a lot of these instances, he's an empty suit and these other ones are dictating or guiding the policy. He's all too happy to let them do that because he likes the attention, he likes the cult following, and he likes the fanaticism and staunch loyalty. Time and again throughout history, it's been shown that humans engage in horrific behavior if they feel there's some sense of authority behind it, like the Nuremberg trials that prompted the Milgram shock experiments. Basically, hey, I'm just doing as I'm told. But the reality is, a lot of times, it's not that simple. People are driving a perverse enjoyment out of what they're doing. This is hitting the right spot for them on some level. So Donald Trump and these political figures that he's associating with and seem to rally around him hate furries. They hate LGBT individuals. They seem to have a lot of hatred. Now, the irony is, a lot of these same individuals are quick to point out their counterparts on the left who are also into censorship or get aggressive when challenged and things of that nature. So in that sense, you have, as is often the case with extremes, or almost like a pendulum effect, a reverse image of the exact same thing. It is also clear-cut and rampant hypocrisy. All of this has conspired, when it comes to furry fandom, to create a chilling effect. Sadly, large parts of the fandom have been split down the middle, extreme right or extreme left, and furries at both sides are exhibiting very extreme attitudes and beliefs towards each other. The difference is those that are more left-leaning are doing it from a place of fear, and those that are more right-leaning seem to be doing it from a place of moral superiority, aggression, or wanting to censor their opponents. This prompts the furs on the extreme left to want to censor or gatekeep, and around it goes. No one in the fandom is benefiting from this arrangement, no matter how they feel or what they tell themselves about it, because our true enemies are all outside of the fandom. Keep in mind that these political figures and MAGA figureheads and those individuals do not draw a distinction between, oh, if you're an ultra-conservative furry and you don't masturbate or you hate gay people, you're okay in my book. To them, we are all an abomination that should be permanently silenced. And in the meantime, this chilling effect has caused more contention, adversarial behavior, and misery in the fandom than ever before, causing the ruin of huge swaths of what was always an accepting, creative, happy place. As Donald Trump takes office, he plans to resolve the TikTok censorship issue, an issue that he originated in the first place. A lot of people drew attention to the wording of TikTok's notice, showing appreciation to Donald Trump. I would agree with them. This is concerning because he created a mess, and now in his fixing it, he gets to redesign it the way that he wants. Of course, he won't be alone. Maneuvers such as this will benefit his acolytes and those that he inspires even more so. I think that I've made a good argument that Donald Trump is a threat to furry fandom in the sense of the ripple effect that he is setting off and throwing fuel on. Does everyone who supports Donald Trump have murderous intent towards furries or gay people? No, but it only takes one person to cause incalculable harm and damage, and I've only just covered the tip of the iceberg here. If you're a furry, Donald Trump and his associates are not your friends. You can have conservative leanings, you can like guns or the military or U.S. history or the Constitution or whatever else. It doesn't mean that you have to be a Trump supporter. And if you identify with some of the extreme religious leanings that I covered earlier in this video, I'd ask you to challenge yourself why. What are you in self-conflict about? What are you afraid of embracing? And as far as politics, I'll close with this. I doubt this is something I'll ever cover again. I hate politics, and I really don't like delving into this, but I felt like this was something I needed to make. However, Looking at political figures to be your salvation is just bad thinking to start with. I don't care for Donald Trump and the people that he associates with, and I don't care for a lot of the people on the other side of the aisle either. I think that's faulty thinking. You should try and draw inspiration and build community from what's around you. And that's what furry fandom is all about. In the beginning of all this, creators came together to build a fandom that was for furries by furries. Boundless creativity, innovation, the belief that anything could be possible if you go after it enough. This is why I've made so many furry history videos on this channel, and I'll continue to do so, because I find it very inspirational. It's something to be valued, treasured, protected, to make sure that nobody is ever able to ruin it or take it away.